Hello and good morning, everybody. I want to welcome you to our Talking Tech webinar series, part 2 on Microsoft Teams licensing changes. I know last week with Steve and myself, we alluded to how some of those changes might have an effect on your UCaaS or CCaaS solution. And we want to talk a little more in depth about that today. We talked about the impact of the licensing changes last week, so we're going to talk about how that might affect your UCaaS and CCaaS solution. So we have a couple of individuals. We have myself from Avail Technology. We have Steve, who is the Senior Microsoft Specialist for AppDirect. We have Dennis York, who is the Partner Development Solutions Engineer for RingCentral. We have Sam Barron, who is the Global Director of Sales for Call Tower. And we have Michael Hamlin, who is the CX Architect for AppDirect. So with that, as a little refresher, I'm going to throw it over to Steve to kind of just go over the changes that Microsoft made to licensing of Teams and kind of what our options are. Steve, if you want to retouch on what we talked about last week, kind of put that all into a nice summation.
Yep, I'll give you the 30,000-foot overview. So April 1st, Microsoft surprised everybody in the US by coming out and saying that the Teams license can be uncoupled from the core 365 licensing. This was a ton of confusion in the US. It had happened in Europe earlier due to some antitrust things that were going on, and we all got surprised. A ton of confusion. And what it means is if you're a company that is not using Teams as your main collaboration platform, you now have the ability to turn it off, if you will, and get some savings on your licensing. This can only happen at renewal. So, there's new pieces to the puzzle, if you will, and complexity that kind of comes in place. The benefit to some customers who are well embedded in the other platforms and don't use Teams can see a reduction in their 365 licensing. You can also pick and choose what users you want to have Teams and not have Teams now. So in one respect, it's a cost reduction. If you look at it another way, because if you add Teams, it could be a price increase. But the bottom line is, if you own a license today that has Teams and you renew it, you do not have to uncouple Teams. So you've got 3 different options to play with now relative to Teams, giving companies some greater choices on how they choose to play with their UCaaS environment.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Steve, for kind of bringing us back up to speed as to what we covered last week. And that is truly one of the main reasons I have 2 vendors that if you work with Avail, we've probably talked about in the UCaaS, CCaaS space, which is Sam from Call Tower, and as well, we have RingCentral, Dennis from Ring. Definitely a very large juxtaposition there. Call Tower, very integrated with Microsoft Teams, very Microsoft Teams centric. And while I would not say RingCentral is hostile to Teams, RingCentral definitely has a feature set that overlaps many of the features that Teams provides. So, today I have put together a couple of questions that I'm seeing from customers as this news came out in April, and we start to continue to evaluate for customers what options they have in the UCaaS, CCaaS space. So I'm just going to throw some of these questions out here, and feel free. It's open forum on answering. So for everybody on the call, how is this affecting the decision-making process when you see customers evaluating a UCaaS solution now with the fact that they can include and can't include Teams?
Yeah, you want me to jump in, Dennis, and then I'll let you take the next question. Does that work? Awesome. So as Steve kind of alluded to, guys, the new changes to the Office 365 and M365 licensing only affect either new customers that are purchasing Office 365 for the first time, or existing customers that want to or have the option to decouple Teams from their Office 365 licensing. So we've been seeing a lot of call towers. A lot of the time when Avail sends us companies that either have Office 365 or interested in using Teams as their phone system, a lot of the time they already have those bundles of licensing from the traditional Office 365 licensing that comes with Teams. So in that case, that's not really affecting the decision-making process when companies are looking at new unified communication solutions, because at the end of the day, they're already leveraging or have the ability to leverage Teams licensing. What we're doing at Call Tower is providing the actual telephony portion of the Teams solution to make Teams your phone system. So for existing customers, we're not really seeing it affect their decision-making process from a UCaaS perspective. It's more the new customers that have the option to either purchase Teams separately or decouple it from, an existing Office 365 suite of products. From a pricing perspective, Microsoft got fairly aggressive on their Office 365 licensing to reduce the cost of what that is. Obviously, the add-on Teams licensing now creates a little bit of an add-on cost there from a UCaaS perspective when you don't have Teams in your Office 365 suite and you have to add it on later down the road. So the good news is there are flexible options out there, and obviously RingCentral's on the call with us today. They have an option to replace Teams if needed, or to not use Teams in your Office 365 suite and still tie their product in. So Dennis, I'll let you touch on that a little bit if you wanted to as well.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Sam.
Yeah.
And you saved me a bunch of words there, so your description of that was spot on. So as Sam indicated, they're doing some integrations directly into Teams. RingCentral does as well. As you probably all are pretty well aware of, there's multiple things that you can do, multiple ways of providing UCaaS within the Teams suite of solutions. Direct routing, Operator Connect, direct routing UCaaS partners, similar to what Call Tower and RingCentral are doing, embedded telephony applications directly into the Teams client. So you're kind of uncoupling and saving on those telephony licenses that would be required within Teams. So there's a multitude of ways to work with Teams. We are perfectly happy from a RingCentral perspective working with any customer that has Teams, because we're providing that world-class, level of UCaaS, CCaaS directly into the Teams client. And then if the customers choose to make a different buying decision, then we have a full suite of applications that doesn't require Microsoft Teams at all. So I'll stop there and see, where we go from the next question, Chris.
Yeah. Michael, did you want to touch on that too? Because I know you're kind of an impartial party in this whole situation. What are you seeing as the decision-making process occurs with customers in the juggle between, do we maintain Teams, do we utilize, and I know we're talking to Ring today, but Zoom would be another company that I would put in that category of offering similar functionality to what occurs inside of Teams outside of the Teams platform.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Actually, I love this, right? Because as this vendor neutral, we use a lot of Call Tower, we use a lot of RingCentral and others, and it really puts everybody on a level playing field, from my perspective. Because if you look at, yes, if you have your 365 license, if you just start to add it up, okay, Microsoft Teams now is $525. You stack an $8 phone license on there, then you still need a calling plan. You're roughly about the cost of what a UCaaS solution would be. So really, we kind of take what used to be, a cost decision out of the scenario, and really it's about what's right for the customer. And so a lot of times I'll evaluate, do you have somebody on staff that's completely comfortable with managing your Microsoft instance, building that PBX out in Microsoft Teams? Are they comfortable doing that? Or do they maybe need the, ease of use of a RingCentral, something where they go out and build it for you, and it's pretty easy to manage and maintain going forward? Do you need some of the additional things that maybe Microsoft Teams doesn't have in it? Do you need SMS? That's not included in Microsoft Teams. Do you need an auto attendant? Do you need these things? And so that's where we'll determine. I get to sit back and say, look, We can do Operator Connect through, Call Tower. We can give you a UCaaS solution if maybe Teams isn't really, you're not completely comfortable living in Microsoft Teams. And right now it's everything's open and available for what's right for the customer. That's what I really like about this.
Awesome. Well, with that, I mean, we can jump into that, kind of leads into the next question here. So are companies reevaluating a move to Teams if they have generational knowledge in their current UCaaS platforms, such as chat and file sharing? And I'll elaborate on this a little bit. I get a lot of directors of technology that come to us and say, well, we've got to do a POC inside of Teams because the C-level suite is saying they want calling in Teams. However, then there's a struggle because they might be a Zoom customer for UCaaS, or they might be a RingCentral customer for UCaaS, and they have all this, generational chat information and file sharing information that's all taken place through their previous UCaaS platform. I'll even put WebEx and GoTo in that category as well, because they can do some of those items. And what we would then really see is customers kind of feeling like they're between a rock and a hard place, where they have to really evaluate how to handle that. I think now with that decoupling, there's a little bit more of a maybe an easier talk track from that. So, Dennis, are you seeing those types of conversations with a really hard reevaluation? And then for Sam, I would also flip this question around and say, what is that migration path if it is determined, like we want to go to Teams? How do we get that old generational knowledge out of the platform and into a Teams platform?
So, I mean, from a reevaluating standpoint, I think we see a lot of collaborative customers that are utilizing Teams that are still thinking from a UCaaS standpoint, do I want to embed all of that? And Michael brought up a great point. Some feature functions that may or may not be available in Teams. Okay, whether you have a calling plan or however you ultimately get your telephony enabled. Michael also mentioned those licensing layers that have to be added on top. So with a lot of the UC providers, we have embedded applications that go directly into the Teams client. That's providing not only those additional functional capabilities, but also a business continuity strategy that can be somewhat difficult with Teams environments, depending on how individuals have chosen to roll it out. So the reevaluating to move existing UCaaS onto Teams, I can't say that we see that a lot. It's more of how do we telephony enable and give us all those UCaaS solutions and capabilities from a routing perspective, et cetera, within Teams. That's what we see most of the time.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Dennis on that too. And just to kind of touch on the whole reevaluation process. So when you think about a customer that has Office 365, most of the time they're at some point in time using the Teams application. If it's a new customer that has never used Teams before, then yes, I would agree. This is definitely changing the knowledge and the whole interest in moving to Teams if they haven't used it in the past. Now, a lot of the time when we're dealing with customers or working with customers that have Office 365 or have already used Teams, they're probably already using the basic unified communication services that come with Teams, like instant messaging, file sharing, presence management, group collaboration, or meetings like we're on today, right? So a lot of the time what companies are doing is when they're evaluating a move to a UCaaS platform, a lot of the time the IT staff is asking for consolidation. So what we see a lot of, and what Microsoft created this option, Operator Connect, to allow third parties like Call Tower to tie our voice services into Teams. The evaluation process really is about what provider they want to work with to integrate their voice services into Teams, because they're really already using it for those basic UCaaS functions. The other piece of it too was the add-on capabilities or the capabilities that are limited there of Microsoft Teams. So let's think of a perfect example here. Things like auto attendance call queues, reporting capabilities behind your call flows. Some of that is limited in Teams. A lot of that, though, we're building out for customers in the Teams Admin Center. And the reason why is because Microsoft makes it pretty easy to build out auto attendance call queues, basic call flows within that Teams Admin Center, where we're evaluating with customers to understand what they're doing from their current system, whether that's a basic IVR or a basic contact center solution. We're trying to figure out what functionality and what reporting they're using within that IVR solution to make sure it's the right fit to move everything to Teams, or if we have to layer on some, another IVR solution of some sort, like a contact center solution. So it's not really about reevaluating. What we're not seeing much of is companies asking themselves if Teams is the right decision, because most of them are already using Teams or have Office 365. It's more about what feature lacks are going to be there, and then how we can determine whether or not we can enhance that solution to make it a full-fledged UCaaS platform.
Yeah, and Chris, let me jump in a second, because what we're seeing is the conversation is turning from how much does it cost to put dial tone into Teams, and really into a business solution discussion. Because, whatever solution it is that we're playing with here has tons of features beyond just dial tone. Chat and dial tone is probably only 10% of what happens in Teams. And in other UCaaS solutions, it's probably the same. So it comes into what business challenge are we trying to solve for? And in that solution, what components go together to best solve for that problem? And then they're looking at price, because the solution is becoming more important than the price. With AI coming in everywhere and about everything today, that's a huge conversation. With integration to different software platforms, like Microsoft has announced that Project Plan One is now fully integrated to Teams. So it's creating a deeper level of what platform do I want to use to integrate everything together, get all the analytics I need, and create the solution to the business challenges that each of the different departments in the company has today. And that's why having multiple options on how we can assess dial tone and the features behind it are really important for customers, because that conversation's happening a lot more than it used to.
And
Yeah,
then
to kind of add on to Steve's point, a lot of time, he mentioned AI, and I'm glad, because when you first put this question up, chat and file sharing, I was thinking of AI, right? Where's this data in? Because AI is only as good as the data that it has. So if you have this storehouse of data, say in Teams, you have this history of chat and you have this history of file sharing that you can then bring into your AI. And when you turn Copilot on, it's already informed. It already has this knowledge, and you just continue to build on that when you have meetings and stuff. But that being said, if you choose not to use Microsoft Teams calling plans, you decide to use Operator Connect, that still is applicable, right? Copilot still functions there perfectly. That being said, other UCaaS providers like your RingCentral with RingSense, like your Zoom with their companion, they've got AI tools in theirs too. So it's kind of, if you already been using Zoom, if you've already been using RingCentral, you've kind of started to build that knowledge base that your AI is going to be trained on. And so it's interesting how AI is kind of affecting that conversation as well.
So Michael, I'd just like to add to that too. And that's a great point. I mean, AI is being infused everywhere. The data available is the critical piece. The beautiful thing with integrations into Teams, whether you mentioned Operator Connect partner, well, a direct routing partner that's utilizing or working in conjunction with Teams is also allowing the Copilot AI full functional capabilities from the telephony side as well. The direct routing partner is giving you all of the telephony routing functions to work directly with the Teams calling capabilities that are built in. So those licenses that you spoke of earlier would be required to do that from the team side as well. But full integration there. So great point. AI, very, very important at this point.
Yeah. So I know we've talked about some of the cost recovery benefits. Are you seeing companies taking advantage of that cost recovery? I would ask this both of Sam, because I know you guys provide general Microsoft licensing for some customers. Same thing with Steve, and then as well, Dennis. Are you seeing customers that are coming along and dropping that team side of the licensing because they have that functionality on their UCaaS system and they've been previously utilizing that, or is that less prevalent than we think? A lot of times from our side of things, we see a lot of customers driven by the cost of the solution. So anywhere we can cost recover is a benefit. But are you seeing that being as prevalent as we might think it would be?
I think with the different levels of licensing, Chris, I can answer this in different ways. So if you think about an organization that has E5 licensing, that comes with everything that you need in a Microsoft suite, except the dial tone, right? That's where the dial tone providers come into the mix. So when an organization is fully invested in Office 365 and fully on, the highest level of licensing with Microsoft, we're not seeing companies reducing, the Teams licensing or the phone standard licensing off that license to save money there, because really what they're thinking of is let's leverage a platform that we're fully embedded with, which is Office 365, leverage all the licensing there to make it our phone system or make it our full UCaaS suite. Now what we have seen, which is kind of cool actually, is Microsoft has licensing like frontline level licensing or business basic or E1 level licensing. E1, A1, nonprofit level E1 licensing, all that's free for nonprofits, academics, academic organizations. And then the frontline worker licensing is really just like basic applications that you give to people that probably aren't sitting by a computer that often. Maybe these are like warehouse managers at manufacturing companies or logistics companies, truck drivers that need an email address, right? So those licenses, the frontline level licensing and the lower licensing on Office 365 used to come with Teams. You used to be able to use it and, use the basic functions of Teams like instant messaging, presence calling, all the stuff we've talked about. So what we have seen is a lot of like corporate headquarters are keeping their Teams licensing in place, but maybe those frontline level users are dropping the Teams to save X amount of dollars per month per hundreds of users out there, because they don't need Teams, right? They're not utilizing the functions of Teams. It's really just their corporate that needs it for their phone system capabilities. So I think that's actually a huge advantage for larger organizations. I don't necessarily think it's like a cost recovery scenario and moving away from Teams for companies. I think it's more just, hey, we have this Office 365 licensing. 90% of the companies using Teams, but these other 10% of the users don't need it. That's where the cost recovery is coming into play. And it's almost making it a better solution for companies that want to go to Teams, right?
Yeah. And if I could put a little plug in here, Steve and I have been on many calls where we review Microsoft licensing. If you're acquiring Microsoft licensing from somebody else, let us know. We can evaluate use case on Microsoft licensing. That's one thing that Avail provides. We work with Steve and internally to just review that licensing and make sure you're getting the most and eliminating spend where you're not using it. So I'll let Steve, I know you were going to probably touch on this as well with the licensing costs, but just a small plug that we can offer that, and we do evaluate those licenses as part of providing Office 365 licensing.
Yeah, and Sam hit the key place that we're seeing the option of Teams being dropped is that retail worker, truck driver, the person who is required to have an email address and probably access to SharePoint for some level of compliance. HR information, things of that nature. But they're not doing IM and chat. They're not in groups of teams. They're not using Planner, any of these things. And anytime you can say, hey, I've got a few hundred licenses and I can save a couple dollars a license, that allows you to either spend it somewhere else or look good when you start evaluating the final budget. But yeah, with all these changes, this whole optimization exercise has taken on some new areas that we have to look at, and there's more questions that are being asked on how to cost effectively create the solution.
I've been able to see customers reduce spend in a couple of ways. So the first way is you take a RingCentral, and if the customer does not want to spend the additional dollars to add phone system license into their Microsoft licensing, and Dennis already mentioned it, you can do the integrated app, and so you don't need to spend that $8 for that Microsoft phone system licensing, and that gives you your app, your dial pad within Microsoft Teams, and it allows you the calling plan of that UCaaS provider, right, like a RingCentral or Zoom or others. The other way is if that customer does like Teams and they want to live natively in Teams, you can use an Operator Connect platform like Call Tower, but you don't have to pay per user. You only pay, they have concurrent call path, right? So you only pay for the amount of calls that are concurrently going to be outside of your company. So you may have a 500 person seat company, but how many of those are going to be on external calls at the same time? That's what you need to figure out. If there's only 100 at the same time, then you only pay for 100 concurrent call paths. You're not paying for 500 call paths because not everybody's going to be on an external call at the same time. So I've been able to see customers reduce either coming from UCaaS going to Teams, or the opposite, they're on Teams calling plans and they want to look at, I've been able to see customers reduce cost in both of those ways.
Yeah. See, and Michael, that's a key point because now you start getting into some of the deeper nuances. If I've got a company on Teams and I have customers on Teams, I can federate between the two organizations and call each other without hitting public switch network at all. I don't need a call path. I don't need a PBX license. So we're seeing that come into play where organizations communicate a lot with larger customers, and it's able to eliminate that cost for the old phone line discussion.
Great.
And that's where the direct routing really comes into play with an advantage.
So, I would probably refer this to Michael, but with more options in the space now, because of that playing field be leveled, as you said, with the changes, how are you seeing from an AppDirect side of things helping navigate the UCaaS selection process? Have you seen some changes in the way that you guys go about navigating this process? You talked about, if finding out that a customer has larger customers that they work with, that might be Teams and that phone line reduction, but what else are you seeing to help customers navigate the selection process?
Yeah, and I think a lot of what's changing is that first call, that initial call, and this could be with with Avail, have Steve on the phone, bring me in. Is a lot of it is education, right? Understanding what the business needs is, and then educating them on, you got option A, option B. You can see, if you're listening to this, you probably see, wow, there's more options out there than I really realized. So the first thing is education and understanding where the benefits are for option A, what the cost is for option B, where all the benefits lie in each of those, where the responsibilities lie, right? Is my organization going to be responsible for doing all of the maintenance, all of the break fix, the upkeep of this, or do I want to, give that to somebody else? So again, it's the technology, it's the people that you have available, and then understanding, what are my end users, what's their environment going to be like. So the way I've seen, seen that change is the first call is almost like we don't present a provider specifically. It's all about Mr. Customer. You have all of these options in front of you. Go back and discuss with your team, understand what the differences are. And then let's talk about, once you kind of made a decision or feel like you have a good handle on things, now let's start talking about, okay, who are the providers for each of these? Who's the provider for Operator Connect for you? Or who's the UCaaS provider? So it's kind of a two-step process, because it is confusing to customers out there in the market.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. When a lot of the conversations that I have with Avails customers, we start that conversation out as an educational practice around, what is Direct Route, what is Operator Connect, what is embedded dialer, what is native Teams voice, how that all works, and the players that kind of go into that, and the features and the benefits and the lack of features in each one of those categories, and how they may overlap, or how they can function. So totally agree. Any input from Sam or Dennis on that as well, in helping the customers navigate those decisions?
I'm happy to just add to what you've already mentioned. Discovery with the customer is key. What are the requirements that they have? And then educating on the options that are there. Business continuity options are always something that I think is important that the customers need to be thinking of specifically. But you're spot on. Discovery and education are the top two items to really determine what is that solution that's going to fit best for that customer.
Yeah, I would add to that too, Chris, and I think that's a great point you mentioned, Dennis, right? Is figuring out what the customer needs for functionality behind their UCaaS applications. The other thing we're seeing a lot of, though, is making sure that we understand the customer's entire IT stack, so what they're doing behind the scenes, right? So, for example, if you guys came to me and said, oh, we have a customer that's on G Suite right now, and I know this is a Microsoft presentation here, but let's pretend this customer is on Google. Obviously, we're not going to go in there and try to position a Teams Operator Connect solution. You're going to position something like a RingCentral or a Zoom, some company that can tie into, a Google backbone. You're not going to tie in a Microsoft related product to, a backbone that's not Microsoft first, right? So I think really what we're seeing in space is more figuring out what application is going to be the best fit for everything they're doing IT wise, whether that's a CRM integration, whether that's their, back end business applications platform. It's really about consolidation. That's what we're seeing a lot of.
Well, and I guess that leads me to kind of my last question then, and I think we've really hit this point. So the fact that it's the last question, do you see companies feeling less forced into Teams with the adjustments to the licensing, the additional options? Michael, you said it used to be a cost conversation, and now everything has kind of been brought more in line. So we feel like we know the answer to that, but I'll let you all touch on that as well.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. It's with that decoupling that happened on April 1st, which was kind of funny, because I'm so much of a nerd that I have a Google phone, by the way. I know this is Microsoft, so don't get mad at me, Steve Leach. I have a Google phone. It popped up on April 1st and said, Microsoft decouples licensing and all of that good stuff. So I really had to go and search, because I had other things pop up, right? It's April 1st. I had to go and search and make sure that wasn't an April Fool's joke, because they had said nothing previously about this, right? It just dropped. So I went and looked that up. So essentially, yeah, what it boils down to is you've now got that extra $5.25 to kind of put back into the bucket and decide where you want to spend that as a customer, right? In addition to the other dollar amounts, the $8 maybe license to stack on phone, and then your calling plan, all that adds up. You can put that back in the bucket, and now you have the decision of, what's right for me and where do I actually want to spend this. So that's the reason why, to me, it's so exciting. There's a lot of people that are already using Microsoft Teams, and so for them, maybe it's not as exciting or a game changing thing. But for people where Teams isn't exactly a fit, where it didn't actually work for their business needs, yeah, this is great. Just gives them a little money back in their pocket to spend wherever.
Yeah, and Michael, I know you're throwing out the $5 to just for everybody on the call. That $5 is generally more seen on the enterprise side. If you're a
Exactly.
Microsoft business licensing customer, the cost savings is still there. It's just a little lower. It hovers depending on the SKU that you have selected. It hovers anywhere in like the $1.25 to the $2.25 range for that.
Yeah, so to touch on this a little bit too, Chris, just kind of based on what Michael was talking about. I personally haven't seen, well, during the pandemic, right? A lot of organizations had Office 365 and they moved to Teams because it was an easy option for them, right? They were leveraging licensing that they already had. So I don't necessarily think it was companies felt forced into going into Teams. I think it was just such an easy option. It was kind of a no-brainer at that point, right? So I think instead of determining this as like a, forced play for UCaaS, I think it's more going to be, this allows companies to have a little bit more flexibility to pick and choose an application if they don't feel like Teams is the right fit, or maybe they're utilizing, RingCentral, Zoom, WebEx calling, whatever it might be in the background. They understand that they have multiple options now, and cost-wise, it's more going to be a decision on the overall solution than it is really going to be a, let's utilize something that we've already been utilizing before, right? So I don't necessarily think it was companies getting like forced in the situation. I think it was more such an easy transition, and now it is a little bit more flexible for that company to make a decision.
Just want to add to that, because you're spot on with those comments. Is, I heard Google mentioned a couple of times, and think about if not all of your locations are all on the same platforms. How do we get them to communicate together easily? And that's when you have a really good opportunity to look at something that can integrate into any of those environments and provide you cross-calling across platforms. So again, that kind of goes back to your discovery. What are your requirements? Sam mentioned your entire tech stack, key points. So I'll stop there, but those are very, very important.
We'll open it up to the group for any customer questions or as well any closing remarks from anybody that's on the panel today. Any additional thoughts, comments as we wait for some of these questions to roll in from the attendees, if there is any? So Steve, I know this was your time to shine last week. Just to throw that out there, we talked a little bit about Copilot last week. Anything neat that you're seeing with layering what Copilot has to offer inside of Teams and Teams Voice?
Yeah, what we're seeing is it going way beyond just replacing these bots you're now seeing all over all of our conference calls. Right, that's giving you some simple kind of a summary of a meeting. We're actually seeing in Teams where actionable items are being taken. So if we agree that we're going to follow up on this meeting on July 10th, and let's set a meeting at 10 a.m. Eastern with all the attendees, those kind of things now are becoming automated versus somebody having to go back and do it fully integrated with the Outlook calendaring, things of that nature. The planner being integrated with AI to Teams where it can take the information that's being discussed. You also have the ability to get kind of a read on everybody's, I'm looking for the right word, sentiment of the call. Are we in agreement? Are we not in agreement? Was it a point of contention? who were the two parties that were discussing it, and what was the conclusion. So it's going way beyond just recording a call and creating a summary. You're getting a lot of information, actionable items, and you've got the ability that if you're 10 minutes late for a call, you can actually through Outlook monitor the call and see the transcripts as well as summarizations if you were mentioned or your projects were mentioned before you jump on the call. So when you come in, you're fully up to speed as soon as you jump in the call. So these kind of things are really saving time, effort, as well as the full integration to the rest of the Microsoft suite, Excel, Word, PowerPoint that people use every day.
Sam, do you have any input from the call tower side of things on what you guys are seeing with Copilot? I know it's probably new for you guys as well, but
Yeah, for sure. It is new, Chris, but we're seeing, so many organizations taking advantage of it just because of the value adds that Steve was talking about. But not only from like a meeting perspective, like we're on today. So Steve was hitting on the bot replacement. A lot of companies that we work with or companies that are on conference calls a lot, whether that's Teams, Zoom, RingCentral, other platforms, had these third-party bots that would record calls, transcribe the calls, and give you action items from the calls, right? The cool part about Copilot is that's all tied into Teams now. So it's all natively integrated into anything you're doing in an Office 365 front. So perfect example was what Steve was mentioning about the action items from calls when you're on a specific Teams meeting, and you can see a transcription of that. You can tell Copilot to summarize, action items, summarize when we have to have the next meeting. But what we're seeing is obviously being a voice provider behind Operator Connect, we're seeing customers take advantage of this from a phone calling perspective as well. So not only can you do it from a meeting perspective, but let's say I'm on the phone with Steve or Chris, and they say, hey, I have a customer that's interested in looking at Teams Operator Connect. They want to meet and do a demo on July 15th, and I'm either driving down the road or multitasking and forget to write this date down. Copilot can remind you via email, can remind you after the call that, hey, you have an action item to do this. So as long as you're utilizing it to its full capabilities, I mean, there's so many enhancements and so many productivity increases that you can, create for yourself out of Copilot. So that's really what we're seeing from a call tower perspective, Chris.
okay. And then I would be remiss if I didn't touch on Ring Insights from Dennis's point of view and what Ring is offering that would be competitive to that Copilot feature set inside of Teams.
So good point. I mean, there's two aspects from the RingCentral perspective. Is if we become a direct routing partner for a Teams customer and in their environment, they get to continue to take advantage of Copilot 100%. And as Sam mentioned, those phone calls become just as important to be processed as a meeting. So because that data could be related to a phone call for a specific sale, and you want to be able to manage all of that. The big key is, if you wanted to be in a different environment, I know we're talking to Microsoft, but from a RingCentral perspective, none of that AI is bolt on. It is a RingCentral platform called RingSense that is infused across the entire product portfolio of RingCentral. That does and provides the majority of the functionality of Copilot. Copilot does have some nice integrations, back to Excel, you're getting your emails, etc. So from the RingCentral perspective, the intelligent virtual assistant has the abilities and will have the abilities to work with multiple different email platforms. But the integrations into Excel and other Microsoft functional capabilities, maybe or maybe not. I mean, that's still yet to be seen if those requirements are really out there.
Well, I think that is going to conclude today. Thanks to our panel for their time today. Thanks, everybody. Thank you all for attending. If you have any questions or you want to continue the conversation around evaluation of either how you're utilizing Teams licensing to any Microsoft licensing for that matter today, or as well how you're utilizing or evaluating a UCAS or CCAS platform, please feel free to reach out to Avail or your trusted advisor at Avail. We're more than happy to help you navigate. You may be introduced to some of the fine gentlemen on this phone call today as well. So thank you, everybody, for your time today.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Have a great day.